You're listening to Fresh Look with Hen Mazzig, presented by the Israel on Campus Coalition. Welcome back to Fresh Look. This week's episode features a unique conversation with a non-binary digital activist and content creator of Iranian Jewish descent, Matthew Nouriel. In recent years, Matthew has been using their voice to passionately advocate and fight for the causes they believe in, namely LGBTQ plus rights and equality within the Iranian and Jewish communities and combating anti-Semitism, using their social media as a means to reach those who relate to their perspective and lived experiences, as well as engaging audiences on panel discussions and speaking engagements across the country. They have taken on leadership roles with both queer and non-queer organizations such as JDC, Entwine, JQ International, Tel Aviv Institute, and most recently joined the team at Jemena, Jews indigenous to the Middle East and North Africa. In 2021, they were the recipient of the Trailblazer Award at the JQ International Annual Impact Awards. Welcome to the show, Matthew.
I am so excited about this special guest that we have today that has been such an inspiration to me and someone that I really love so dearly. And I feel I'm so proud to have them as part of our community. Matthew, and as some people know, the Empress Mizrahi. How are you today?
Hi, Khan. Thank you for the lovely, sweet, kind introduction. Know that I feel exactly the same way about you. And I'm doing well today. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing great. You're joining us from Los Angeles, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So before we start, maybe you should start and tell us a bit about your story. What got you to doing the work that you're doing today? What is the work that you're doing today as well?
Should I start from the beginning? No, we don't want to do that. I was born in London, England in 19... So who am I and what is the work that I'm doing? Well, Matthew Nouriel, Iranian, British-born Iranian Jew, queer, very Iranian, very Jewish, all of the above. And I work in the sphere of digital advocacy and as a nonprofit professional for the organization Jemena, which stands for Jews Indigenous to the Middle East and North Africa. And my goal, and certainly in terms of my social media advocacy, is to, well, let me back up. I felt, it took me a long time to kind of come to terms with my intersecting identities, that is being queer, Jewish, and Iranian. I always felt throughout my life that I would sort of have to appease one side, one part of my identity for the other, or, you know, if I'm in a Jewish environment, I have to downplay my queerness, or if I'm, you know, in an Iranian environment, to downplay my Jewishness, or any, you know, in a queer environment, I would have to downplay my Jewishness sometimes, and it became very frustrating to me. So I sort of made the decision a few years ago that I'm going to choose to be as unabashedly visible in my identities as I can be, because if I felt the way that I felt, surely there were other people who did. So the advocacy that I do through social media and through public speaking engagements is centered around that. It's centered around sort of the unification of being queer, Jewish, and Iranian, and not compromising any one part of it, part of myself for anyone. So.
Oh, yeah, there's definitely one person that can relate to some of it, and it's myself. I think that those, you know, the intersection of your identities is so beautiful, and just embracing it is, I think, really shines not only for me but a lot of people online. So let's break it apart, and we'll start with your Iranian identity, your Mizrahi identity. It's Mizrahi Heritage Month as well. Happy Mizrahi Heritage Month.
Thank you.
So maybe you can share with the viewers how your Mizrahi background has affected the work that you're doing today.
I mean, it affects the work that I do greatly, because like I said, I always found myself running from one part of my identity or the other. And the conclusion that I came to is that you can never run away from who you are. So once I stopped running away from who I was, whether it be my queerness or my Persianness, Mizrahiness or Jewishness, I started to lean into all facets. And there's something very empowering about that. So I started to really in terms of being Mizrahi, really educate myself on what it was. Like, why did I feel othered for being Mizrahi within certain spaces? And what is it that people maybe look down on? Or what is it that people maybe celebrate about being Mizrahi? What does it truly mean to me to be a Mizrahi Jew? And more specifically, to be Persian, a Persian Jew. So not running away from that kind of made all the pieces kind of make sense, because it's within every part of the fiber of my being. So I hope that kind of answers your question. Do you want to hear like about the history of?
I mean, I would also love to hear about the challenges. I mean, you're saying that it wasn't always easy. What do you mean by that?
No, it's been very difficult. Iranian culture, specifically, when I speak about Iranian culture, first of all, I want to be clear that I'm speaking through my lens, which is that of a Jewish Iranian person, because that's the community that I grew up in. And it's a very traditional society and community, and it has very rigid gender roles, for one. It's a very conservative community, and things are changing now, certainly in Los Angeles, but that's not easy for somebody like me who was very queer from jump, like from as long as I can remember, and I'm sure as long as anybody can remember, I was very queer, and that didn't sort of fit in well with these sort of ideals that are placed on us within Persian Jewish society. I want to be careful not to say anything sort of wrong. And I mean, there is nothing wrong to say. The truth of the matter is that it was just difficult for me. I mean, I'd experienced a lot, certainly as a teenager once I came out. Once I started dabbling in drag, which I started doing as a teenager and then stopped because it created such a problem for my family.
What problems?
Well, I mean, I came out at 15, and then I discovered drag by the time I was 16, and I really fell in love with it. Like, it was just mind blowing to me and it's because of RuPaul. I mean, it was the 90s and RuPaul came out, and I was just my mind was blown. Like, I'd never seen anything like that. Like, RuPaul was so not only like fearless in presenting themselves as who they are and how they wanted to present themselves, but doing it with so much joy, which is something I grapple with. I'm not like this joyous, happy, bubbly person, but nonetheless, it was mind blowing to me. And I was like, that's what I want to do. That's who I am. Like, that's what I want to delve into. And I started to do it. But it created a lot of problems within my family, because being Iranian, first of all, there's this concept in Iranian culture called aberu. Aberu, it loosely translates to reputation, but it's so much more than reputation, because it's not only like based on you. It's like what you do has a direct effect on your parents, which has a direct effect on your siblings, and then your cousins, your extended family, and then the greater community. And it's a lot of pressure. And this concept is like paramount in Persian society, and it's a very it can be very traumatizing, because as a teenager, it was like a lot of pressure. Like, now I have to like do all these things or fall in line with all these things that are so the antithesis of who I am. Like, it was so far from who I am. So how do you sit on top of that? How do you sort of hide who you are in order to fit this societal ideal that's been set out for you? And I couldn't do it. I tried. I just couldn't do it. You know, I was put in therapy from the age of 6 to 11, 3 times a week. And I don't want to sound like I'm blaming my parents for anything. I'm not blaming them. They didn't know any better. I mean, you have to understand, they went to the UK from Iran, and then they had me a year later. And then it just culturally, nothing, I'm sure, made sense to them. And they didn't understand or know or have the tools. You know, it's not like today where we have language and tools that we have now. They didn't have it then. So they put me in therapy. And then once I came out when I was a teenager, it was therapy again, and it was medication. And it was, I was taken to a doctor who said that they could cure my gayness by giving me testosterone therapy. So I went on a round of testosterone for 3 months. And all of this was like, it was very traumatizing. And now I'm not saying it's only Jewish Iranian people that have exposed their queer kids to something like this. It certainly wasn't, but that was my experience. And it certainly felt like it created a lot of rage within me towards the Iranian community and the Jewish community, and specifically Iranian Jews. So that's why when I say it, it was just a few years ago that I was like, enough is enough. Like, I need to come to terms with who I am. And as much pain as these societal standards had caused me, I'm still part of that society and I'm still part of that community. So instead of running away from it, I chose to lean into it and to stand up for myself and say, this is who I am, and there are others like me, and there's nothing you can do about it. We're here, we exist, we matter, and I'm not going anywhere. So what now,
Yeah, deal with that.
Deal with it.
No, I think it's beautiful. And I think, everything you're talking about is so important, specifically with the recent shooting in Club Q in Colorado Springs, and to know that the LGBTQ community around the world is still not completely safe, and or the games in Qatar where they're banning LGBTQ folks and any LGBTQ identification. What do you make of the situation in Iran for the LGBTQ community?
I mean, I've been talking about this for years, and the situation in Iran for LGBTQ plus people is dire. I mean, it's literally life or death. Right before everything happened with Masa Amini, maybe 2 weeks prior, 2 LGBTQ plus activists were handed a death sentence, and they're sitting on death row right now, along with so many others. I mean, it's estimated since the Islamic Republic regime took over Iran in 1979, it's estimated that between 4,000 and 6,000 LGBTQ plus people have been executed. So it's dire. And, I personally have spoken to many queer young people from Iran who've reached out to me on Instagram over the years. And it's heartbreaking knowing that I feel so helpless in the situation. Like, what can I do? And when you're talking to somebody one-on-one and they're, sort of spilling their guts to you because they have no other outlet, you feel helpless. And all I can do is sort of try and reassure them and be a friend to them and a shoulder to cry on, or somebody even just to talk to. I mean, you'd be surprised how many people just wanted to know how I did drag makeup, So it's a tough line to walk, because somebody in the US or in the West or who lives in a free society, I can say, fuck everybody, do you, there's resources, but they don't have that in Iran. They don't have an LGBTQ plus center or, therapy, resources for therapy, or government funded resources or nonprofits that are geared towards helping queer people. They don't have it. So what do you tell somebody, It's really hard. So the situation is dire, and the current uprising that's happening in Iran, it's so important for us to keep putting it out there. Yes, it's a woman-led revolution, which is incredible, because women's rights is a huge problem in Iran. Legally speaking, women are the worth of a woman is 50% of that of a man. This is legally speaking. I mean, this is like constitutionally speaking in the Islamic Republic of Iran, right? A Jewish person is constitutionally considered to have a third of the worth of a Muslim person. Jewish and other religious minorities, the ones who are even allowed to exist. And queer people aren't even on that scale. They have no worth. It's awful and it's dire, and when people are, I always say, when people are chanting in protests, woman, life, freedom, the freedom part of it isn't it does we're not saying freedom for Iran for some Iranians. We're saying freedom for Iran for all Iranians, and LGBTQ plus Iranians exist. So when we're saying free Iran, freedom for Iran, women life freedom, that freedom applies to everybody. It's for everybody, and I really want to drive that message home to a lot of people within the Iranian community. So.
Yeah, you're absolutely doing it, and with your social media activism and on Instagram, I think all of this comes through, and it's such an important issue to fight for. And what do you think? Where do you think the protests are going? What's next for Iran?
It's really, really hard to say. It doesn't look like the protests are going to slow down anytime soon. I don't think that they are. But every day something new is coming out. Like just this past weekend, the crackdowns were vicious and mostly affecting Kurdish provinces within Iran. They were absolutely vicious. But from what I'm seeing, it's not stopping anybody. And I think that that's something that we haven't seen since the 1979 revolution. It's not quite at that level yet, but I don't think I don't think the uprising is going to stop. And I don't know. It's really hard to say. Like I say, it's going to change. The regime is going to fall. It's going to happen. It's not sustainable. When that's going to happen is really hard to say. It could happen within a month. It could happen within a decade. We don't exactly know. But I think that that's, regardless of when it happens, that's the direction it's going in, and it's not going to stop. And I want to add to that I'm completely floored and enamored and just obsessed and in love with the Iranian people, and the show of strength that they're presenting right now is unbelievable. Like, it's just incredible. I don't know how many of us would be able to be, knowingly go to a protest, knowing that it could mean your life, or knowing that you could get arrested or get shot in the head or blinded, or all of these awful things that are happening, and going anyway because you are fighting for your freedom. And I think that that's a result of 43 years of being held in a chokehold by a government that doesn't value its people at all. They've had enough. They're not scared anymore. Like, what more can you, I think they're saying, what more can you take away from us? You want to take my life? Well, I already don't feel like I have one. And they're willing to die for their freedom. That's the most admirable thing in the world to me.
Yeah, 100%. And I was really moved by some of the support that the Iranian people received around the world. But it seems like when people talk about Israel and the conflict, the Arab-Israeli conflict with the Palestinians, there's so much more mobilization, and it is important to stand up for every injustice, of course. But we haven't seen, at least from what I've been following around the world, the levels of support that the Palestinians are usually receiving. Why do you think it's? What's the reason for this?
I think that the pro-Palestinian propaganda machine has been working since the 1960s, if not before. And I think that relentless sort of misconstruing of the truth and repositioning oneself as a victim has been at work for, I think, 2 or 3 generations now. So what we're seeing now is the results of that essentially PR campaign, where the truth has been completely eradicated at this point and replaced with these concepts and theories and ideas that are not entirely true. And that can be very powerful, because now the current generation of young Palestinians within Palestinian territories believe it. And when you believe something, you can really stand behind it. And so when you're seeing this fight that they're putting out, it's very compelling. Unfortunately, there's a whole other side to that that's not being presented, and when it is presented, it's shut down. So I mean, I don't know. I can only speculate that that's part of what it is. I think also maybe it has something to do with the fact that many Iranian people in diaspora have done really well for themselves. So I think and I think Jewish people can sort of relate to this to a degree, not a degree, like Jewish, it's the same thing with Jewish people in a sense, even more so because we managed to regain sovereignty in our homeland. Nobody like, you know, it's like punching up, like nobody really care. People don't care as much. Like they need to see you suffering in a way. I don't know. I hope I'm making sense. Like it's really easy for people to walk through Los Angeles and go, look at all these Persians driving nice cars or whatever. And they don't want to sort of think about what it took for a community of people, which is a gross generalization. First of all, not all Persians drive nice cars and have money, but it's really easy to sort of look at that and say, well, what's the problem? You know, they can just leave. And I've heard people say that too. Well, why don't they just leave? You know, they say it about Jews in Iran all the time. I hear it all the time. Well, there's only 8,000 left. Why don't they just leave? It's not that easy to just leave. You can't just leave. You had any idea how hard it is? I mean, back to the LGBTQ issue, like Iran, they say, well, why don't they just leave? You know how many of them are stuck in Turkey? Like they get to Turkey and there's somebody who I'm talking to for the last 3 years. He's stuck in Turkey. He's been there for 8 years. He can't work. They treat you like shit. And you just have to kind of wait until you can get asylum in another country. So it's not easy to just leave.
I completely agree with you. And I think, you know, that the other piece that is missing with some of the protests and the attacks on Israelis, on Jewish people in the West, when it comes to the conflict, is of course anti-Semitism, and you know a lot about that. You spoke at the West Hollywood City Council meeting in September in support of the IRA definition of anti-Semitism. And after that, while you were heckled, you kept speaking, and you actually got, I mean, I'm sure there were other elements, but definitely your speech got the council to vote to adopt IRA. So what was your strategy, your successful strategy? What did you speak about, and how did it felt? Like, walk us through it.
That specific incident, or just, yeah. So the organization Stand With Us, so I know somebody that works there, and she reached out to me and said there's this city council meeting and they want to adopt the IRA definition of anti-Semitism. And from what we understand, like all of these anti-Israel college campus groups are going to be showing up, and we need to show up as well. And that's all you need to tell me. Like, you don't even need to go that far. Like, I'm there, you know? So, and I live in the city of West Hollywood, so it meant something to me even more so. And I showed up, and first of all, I want to say that I was somewhat disappointed in our Jewish community. More of us need to show up. There was probably 2 or 3 times more people there who were there to oppose adopting the IRA definition than there was us. So that was first of all. But I thought, okay, well, we're gonna do this, and I'm gonna talk. And I noticed when people were talking that they had a very clear strategy, which was as soon as the beeper went off, even if you were like a millisecond over your speaking time, they started to heckle and say, they started screaming time. So it was scary. I mean, I was scared. It was scary. And I just thought, okay, well, you're just going to get up there and you're going to say you prepared this thing that you're going to wrote, and you prepared this thing that you wrote, and you're not going to let people get in the way. You know, you're not going to let your fears get in your way. You're going to get up there and you're going to do this, and you're going to say what you have to say, because I had something to say. And so I said it, and I gave the speech, and you know, a number of people got up and spoke, and they unanimously voted to adopt the IRA definition, despite all of the people that were there opposing it. And here's why. Anybody with sort of any sense of logic can see what the people that were opposed to the IRA definition were arguing really didn't match with what the IRA definition is, right? There's nothing in the IRA definition that says you can't criticize Israel or you can't criticize the Israeli government. I think when some examples are listed, one of them involves Israel, and that's what people are sort of grabbing onto, saying, oh, if you take on this definition, then you can't criticize Israel. Well, that's not true. The criticism that's used as an example, which I don't remember exactly what it was, but it's based on misinformation. So when you're spreading misinformation about Israel, that's when it becomes problematic. When you're spreading misinformation about the only Jewish state, that's when it becomes problematic. So, it was scary, but I went ahead and did it. They passed the thing, and one of the council members who I actually know at the end, who was a queer Iranian Muslim woman, who told them, because the minute they announced that they passed it, like, they went crazy and they all got up and started booing and screaming and saying City of West Hollywood is Islamophobic and all of this craziness. And she said very plainly, this was a definition that was created by Jewish people, for them to protect themselves. If you have a problem, I urge all of you to put it in writing and present it to us. And we will present it to, the council meeting, just like we did for this, and we will present a resolution. But none of them were interested in doing that. They were interested in kicking and screaming and shouting and saying all this ridiculous stuff. So as what I see so much of was sort of put on full display there, which is, if you actually care about Palestinian rights, do something about it that doesn't involve creating more conflict, because Israel isn't going anywhere. It's just not. We fought too hard for it. We fought for years for it. We waited for 2,000 years for it. We finally got it. It's not going anywhere. And anybody can say whatever they want about the IDF. The IDF is as strong and as powerful as they are because they have to be. And as long as we have them, our country is protected. So it is what it is, I mean, I just get so infuriated about it, because there's so much that people can actually do. And I'm going to throw this in as well, this whole concept of pinkwashing that everybody's so up in arms about. I did not see one single anti-Israel activist stand up when a Palestinian gay person was kidnapped and taken into Palestinian territory just a month or two ago, beheaded. He was beheaded. Nobody said a thing. This poor guy's life was ended. Like, if you really care about queer Palestinians, what are you going to do? What are you doing about that? Like, that's what I want to know. And I'll tell you something. If there is a movement that is there to protect queer Palestinians without having to sort of delegitimize Israel or delegitimize the queer movement in Israel, which might not be perfect, but it's leaps and bounds far ahead of anywhere else in that region, I'd be the first to join that movement, hand in hand. So
I'll be with you marching as well.
Amen.
This was so profound, so much information and ideas that I can fully get behind, and I'm sure many people can as well. Before we finish, I want to ask you, Matthew, we spoke about so many different parts of your identity, so many layers of your identity. I love that you just embrace all of them fully, and that you're not, people often say, like, oh, are you 50% that and 50% that? No, you can be 100% everything that you are. But how do you do that? Like, how do you take all of this and all the different parts of who you are and bring them together? And what is your advice for our listeners that might be struggling with those identities or similar identities?
I think the power of community should not be underestimated. And I think that what worked for me was really, first of all, I mean, it's been a few years now that I know of you, and I've been lucky enough to be able to get to a place where I can call you friend. And somebody like you really inspired me. Not somebody like you really inspired me, because you were an example of what it is to be a Mizrahi Jew who is also queer and who is open about it and comfortable with it and visible about it. So there was you, there's my friend Arya, there's the organization JQ International, Jewish Queer International. It's an LA-based Jewish queer organization that did Persian-specific programming. It's sort of seeking out these communities and individuals that speak to you and who you are. That's what the most important thing, I think. And that's a big reason why I do what I do, is because I also want to be visible in myself. So that's the whole point. I think that's first and foremost super important, because then it takes away the feeling of being alone in who you are. And the other thing is just sort of constantly delving into yourself. I feel like that sounds narcissistic, but kind of like keep learning about yourself, like whether it be through therapy or through meditation or whatever it is. Like for me, it was therapy. Keep learning about yourself, who you are, and empowering yourself in who you are. So, oh, I'm gay, I need to hide it. Instead of going to I need to hide it, go into, well, what does it mean to be gay? What does it mean to be a queer person? Are there other people who are gay within my community? Let me find them, and let me figure out how I can find pride in that. That's so important. I guess it's easier said than done, and it can take a lifetime, but it just is what it is. The other option is to hide who you are, and that does not work for anybody. So yeah, just keep seeking out community, keep seeking out people who are on the same wavelength as you and who you admire and look up to, and befriend them or talk to them or just follow them, whatever it is, I hope that's good advice. I think that's pretty good advice.
I think it's excellent. I think it's amazing. Matthew, thank you so much for everything you're doing, for the light that you shine, and for being such an inspiration. You say that I inspire you, but I mean, it's amazing how the tables have turned, and I look up to you so much now. Thank you. I'm honored to be your friend, and I'm honored to be part of your community. And yashar koach, upward and onward.
Upward and onward. The honor is mine, my friend. Thank you. So heartwarming. Thank you for having me on. This is wonderful.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Fresh Look. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to our channels. We'll see you next time.